All right, Charlie, I have 133. Let's go ahead and get started.
Let's do it.
Welcome, everybody. My name is David Davis. I'm the Vice President of Programs for the Kentucky Association of Government Communicators. Welcome to everyone that's here today, especially on what has been one of the nicer weather days. Glad you've at least come inside for this to be with us today. Today we are lucky to have Sam Dick, news anchor with WKYT-27 in Lexington. Sam was born in Lexington, Kentucky. His father and his father's family goes back to the late 1700s in Bourbon County. His mother's family immigrated from Sicily in the early 1900s. He is a second generation Italian. He has 4 sisters and grew up in Louisville, Northern Virginia, and Atlanta. He was an Eagle Scout, a class of 1971. He has backpacked on the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington State. In 2013, he completed an Ironman in Louisville, which consisted of a 2.4-mile swim in the Ohio River, a 112-mile bike, and a full marathon for a total of 140.6 miles nonstop in 12 hours. I've never done a marathon, but I have done a half, so that is some impressive stuff there. His broadcasting career started in 1979 at WKYT as a news reporter and later co-host of PM Magazine in 79 to 82. He moved to New York City as a news reporter at WCBS for 82 and 83, consumer, medical, and investigative reporter at WESHS in Florida through 87. Then he returned to WKYT in September of 1987 as early and late night news anchor. He is the winner of the Edward R. Murrow Awards and 5 regional Emmy Awards. He was inducted into the 2020 Kentucky Broadcaster Association of Hall of Fame. He's anchored all-day coverage of the crash of Flight 5191, all the elections since 1987, and field anchored the UK Final Four coverage since 93, including the last 3 UK national championships. So he's been married for 25 years to Noelle Dick, owner of Cycle U in Lexington. He has 3 grown children, Samuel III, Leah, and Christina. And his hobbies include fishing, exercise, and travel across the U.S. and the world. So join me today in welcoming Sam. I do know that Charlie has a few words he wants to say, but I think it's going to be a great presentation today. So Sam, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be with you all.
Sam, I look forward to hearing what you have to say today. We've all been big fans. First off, I want to just get a couple of housekeeping things out of the way. This is our very first Lunch and Learn of the new year, 2021, and we're optimistic that 2021 will be much better than 2020 was. And I want to start by saying we have a new slate of board members, and I can't see the entire list of who's with us today, but I want just to make mention and say welcome to, and I've got names here so I don't miss anybody. Vice President-elect, or the President-elect, and our Administrative Vice President, Regina Stratton. Regina, are you with us today? David Davis is continuing on as our Vice President of Programs. Our new Treasurer is Maxine Rudder. I know Maxine's there. You can wave. And Maxine, anyone whose name I call, please feel free to say hello and welcome. Any words of wisdom for us, Maxine? You're muted. She's still muted. We'll take that as that she's excited to have the job. Kevin Kelly from the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's Kevin. You say hello, Kevin?
Absolutely. Hello. Good to see everybody. And looking forward to today's discussion.
Kelly Foreman continues on as our secretary. Natasha Lacey from the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet is also on our board. I will be here through this year as your president, and we're looking forward to a good year. One thing that will make it a good year is our awards of excellence. We did not do these last year because of COVID. We hope to, or actually, we are going to do them this year. And so some of your best stories from last year, we look forward to seeing. We have that call for entry. David, chime in anytime you'd like, because we have a call for entry that's coming up within the next few weeks, and we'll go out and long story short, the awards are expected September-ish. Kind of fill me in there, Dave. Late summer. Any thought? I can't remember your calendar.
Yeah, so we should have the call for entries out next middle of next month, middle of March. All the information will be on our website. Early bird deadline will be somewhere middle of May. Final deadline will be somewhere first week of June. And then sometime middle of September, we should have the actual award ceremony. Whether that be in person or virtual, we have no idea at the moment. But those are the major dates that you're looking at.
We have 3 new categories, 2 that were existing, radio and television, that were just a single category for each. Now we have a long form and a short form, so that we don't have, for example, a PSA or a commercial going up against a documentary. And so we have video short and audio short and long form. Also, there's a new one I want you to think about a little bit to see where this goes. Our speaker today is certainly no stranger to this category. It's live performance and working without a net, that we have called it. If you have someone, maybe even you, who has been in a press conference or in any live situation that was somewhat precarious, unscripted, things could go wrong. You had an unruly crowd, or you had a happy crowd. Maybe it was kids at school. What did you do to quell that situation and bring it under control? And we want to see maybe a little write-up about that, if you have audio or video of how this communicator really worked under pressure to bring a situation under control, to bring peace to the crowd. That's on a new category this year. Think about it. If you can enter it, we'd love to see it and award whoever these folks are that did the outstanding work. So, outstanding work in a live performance. I think I could easily go to Sam Dick. Dick, do you ever do recorded, or how many years now have you been live?
Anchoring 34. Yeah. And they keep adding newscasts. So now I'm up to about 3.5 hours live every day.
Hugh Downs once had the record, but I mean, live performance is really when you have to be on your toes.
Well, they're going to take you live whether you're ready or not. So
your audience today is government communicators, if I can communicate that. So we will do everything from do web, radio, TV, magazine articles, news releases, information about anything government is what we do. I was looking at your website and your app, and in the news is COVID-19, vaccines, testing, unemployment, civil unrest, snow and ice removal, schools not in session, Tiger Woods accident. All of these in some way are government or touch on government. I'm thinking maybe the only one that really doesn't yet is the wall over at the Jif plant that just fell today. So would you take that, please, and run with it and let us know about yourself and remember who you're talking to. And we'd like to hear maybe how we play in to today's news.
Yeah. And, the past year has been extraordinary in many ways for most of us, and certainly in my position as a communicator to our audience. We have, in terms of the government, just throw this out there, we have carried the governor's afternoon news conference, or briefing rather, every single day since March 6th, I think was the very first case was announced on that Friday, a woman out of Harrison County. And he was doing it 5 days a week, and now he's down to about 3 days a week. But we carry that live generally as soon as he gets into the COVID part of the briefing. So that's just one more thing that we've been doing that's hopefully helping people out there. Real quickly, I always think it's interesting to know someone's roots, and you all mentioned my Italian roots. and my Bourbon County roots, I just want to say that it's kind of amazing, I think, that each of us is here in our own way. In my case, a young man, my dad, who grew up without a father. My namesake died when my dad was a baby, and grew up under rather poor circumstances in a small town in Bourbon County called North Middletown. I don't know if anybody there is familiar with North Middletown, but that's where most of my ancestors are buried on my dad's side at the Christian church there. He was in the Navy, and of all things, in Long Beach, California, at a dance, met my mother, who was from Centerville, Iowa. My grandfather ran a coal mine in Iowa. She ended up visiting her sister in Long Beach, California. So you had a young man from North Middletown, Kentucky, meeting a young woman from Centerville, Iowa, and that's how I got to be Sam Dick II. My namesake was Samuel Dick. So always interesting, I think, to know people's backgrounds. I've lived in big cities all my life, in the suburbs, but I come from small town roots. I grew up in the 60s, so I'm going to date myself here, but I grew up in the 60s watching the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite, mainly because my father was a CBS correspondent. He started out in Louisville at WHAS after graduating from the University of Kentucky, and was hired by CBS in 1967. And if you know your history, you know that 67, 68 were very tumultuous, crazy years in this country's history, particularly 68. With the assassinations of Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, the Vietnam War, race riots, you name it, it was a very, very big news year. So I grew up as a teenager, a young man, watching the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And of course, following my dad's career, he was based in Washington, D.C., and then we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. But I grew up a UK fan because of him. So I remember being in the driveway of our home in Atlanta, Georgia, dialing in Kaywood Ledford. I could get WHAS at night on the AM radio, my driveway in Atlanta, and I would listen to Kaywood call the UK basketball game. So I've been a UK fan, despite the fact I was living in Atlanta, and before that, Washington, D.C., I grew up being a UK fan. So my journey coming back home, I was born in Lexington, my journey coming back here, the first time out of school at Georgia, I came back in 1979 as a knew nothing reporter, just 23 years old, and from that became a co-host of a magazine show called PM Magazine that was on every night, and then went to New York City as a reporter, then Orlando, Florida as a reporter, and then at the old age of 31, Ralph Gabbard hired me to take the place of John Lindgren, who had left to become one of the main anchors here, and I've been here ever since. I worked the late shift, so I've been on the late shift for 34 years, which means basically on a normal day, which we have not had many of those lately, but on a normal day, I come into work about 2 o'clock, and at 2:30, we will have a meeting of all the producers, reporters, anchors, the assignment editor to talk about the newscast coming up at 4 o'clock. So we have newscasts at 4, which Amber solos with anchors with Victor, and then I come on at 4:30, and I do the 4:30, the 5, the 5:30, the 6, then I do the 7 to 8 on the CW live, and then I do the 11 o'clock at night live. So I generally get home about 1/4 to midnight, and that's the shift I've been on. As you all have detailed, I have been a reporter as well as an anchor. That's not the case with every news anchor across the country, but my roots are in storytelling, my roots are in writing, my roots are in reading, and that's how I ended up in journalism, in addition to seeing my dad on the news. I fell in love with the storytelling part of this job. So I've done everything, as you've mentioned, from the Comair flight crash, which is probably one of the most important local stories I've ever covered in my life. 49 people were killed, to 3 national championships with 3 different coaches at UK. And so my job is to gather information. And of course, let's go back to 1979, 1980. There were 4 TV stations on your dial at your home in Kentucky: ABC, NBC, and CBS, and PBS. That was it. No computer. Everything was either shot on film or videotape. And of course, now social media has changed everything, because we're on Twitter and we're on Facebook and we're on Instagram. And I say we, I mean those of us in the newsroom are required to be a part of that social media. So the traditional press release that you send out, of course, is still something that we look for, and we can talk about that. but obviously social media is a very important tool to gathering information. If Coach Calipari wants to make a statement on Twitter, which he does often, that immediately becomes news without any interview. That becomes news because of who it's coming from. I'm here to help you all in any way I can as we talk about how you do your job and how perhaps I can help you or answer any questions about that. Basically, in each newsroom, there is a gatekeeper, I will call him or her, which is the assignment editor. And if you walk into any TV station in the country, you will see an elevated desk in the middle of the newsroom usually, surrounded by scanners of police and fire departments and phones and computers and a big board behind the assignment editor showing where the various crews are going that day. We obviously have limited number of reporters and journalists, and we cover a wide area. I mean, we cover all the way to Shelby County, all the way north to Covington, all the way east to Ashland, all the way into eastern Kentucky towards Johnson County and Paintsville and towards Hazard, where we have a TV station, and all the way south to Williamsburg to the Tennessee line. So that's a lot of ground to cover. And so we have to be pretty picky each day as to what we're going to cover. But at 2 o'clock, 2:30, we talk about the newscast coming up, and then we talk about what we have planned for the evening. We do a Fox newscast. We share that with the Fox station. That's a shared thing at 10 o'clock. That's with Marvin and Kristen Plum. And then at 11, we're live again. So our cycle is continuous. We have people coming in here at 11:30 at night, working all night to get ready for the morning news, which starts at 4:30 in the morning. I talked to my assignment editor, and you may want to write this down, and maybe you've already got it. But if you're sending out a press release, it's really best that it goes to everybody in the newsroom. Originally, I was thinking, well, maybe it's best if you send your news release to the assignment editor. But he corrected me on that today and said, it's really best that it goes to everybody, and that way somebody immediately can address it or can read it and say, okay, here's something we need to be talking about. And that's news@WKYT.com. So if you're looking for an email from our station that you can reach out to very quickly with a press release, it should go to news@WKYT.com. Obviously, if you have a personal relationship or professional relationship with someone, you know a reporter, you know a news anchor, you know a photographer, you know one of the journalists, that's also a very quick way to get your story or your press release out and say, hey, I'm sending this to the newsroom, but you may want to look at this too, and you may find this part of it interesting. That's another way. We also answer the phone. I mean, any phone call I get, as long as I'm not getting cussed out for whatever reason, I usually return within 24 hours. Any email I get, I try to return within 24 hours. Things addressed to my Facebook page, whether it's the personal one or the KYT Facebook page, I also will try to watch that as well. So there's a lot of different ways to reach out to the media, obviously. And I guess one of the things that I would stress is that if there's any way to take a story to a human level, is what is really going to grab our attention. I'll give you an example. Jackson County has been hit really hard. One of the counties hit hard by power outages in the last 2 weeks. And so I've been interviewing the judge executive. And we found out that the judge executive was driving to Laurel County to pick up oxygen tanks to take them to people who were stuck at home, who had been fighting COVID and were recovering at home and needed oxygen to survive. Well, that's a hell of a human interest story. And so it takes the story way beyond just a power outage. It takes the story way beyond the number of customers who don't have power, which we report. But it takes it to more of a human level. So the story I just told you is much more interesting. And even though someone doesn't live in Jackson County, they're going to find that story really interesting. So if there's any way, whatever department or agency or group you represent, if there's any way to humanize it like that, that's the kind of thing that's going to grab our attention, and we're probably going to try to report on and maybe even do an entire story on it. Does that make sense? And maybe I'm telling you things that you already know. I don't know. You tell me. But it's harder to find those stories of human interest. And sometimes I think those human interest stories float through a department or an agency or a group of people, and they kind of don't think they wouldn't be interested in that. But a lot of times those are the exact kind of stories we're interested in. It means that you've got to get personal with that situation and allow that person's name, for example, to be used who maybe is receiving the oxygen tank. Or it means the judge executive in Jackson County has got to be willing to be interviewed. And not everybody's crazy about being on television. I realize that. So that's one kind of hurdle on those kind of stories. Any thoughts?
If anybody has
There you
questions
go.
out there, feel free to type them into the chat if you want, or unmute yourself and ask Sam directly. Just remember to remute yourself once you go back off.
I had a question, Sam, if I may. You mentioned Fox a minute ago, and we watch Fox 56 News, and I understand that's just local news, but some people may see Fox as they would CNN, a couple of national news organizations that see news as something that better fits into their particular political ideology. As far as local news, the years that I have been in it, it's always been the goal to shoot straight down the middle. Is that how it still is in local news? Do you see any sway either way?
I can only speak for myself, and I've been in broadcasting 44 years. And I can only speak generally for our station. And I will tell you that I've never been called down to the news director's office or the general manager's office and said, I kind of want you to take this angle on this story. That's never happened. My job, and through watching my dad on CBS back in the day, but also just the way I treat things is that to be as straightforward as possible. And sometimes it's in the smallest details. For example, you will never hear me say, without exception almost, in a story, Trump or Obama. I will always give them their title. So it doesn't matter what party they're in. It doesn't matter what my political or opinion is. I respect the office. It's always Senator McConnell. It's always Congressman Barr. It's always Mayor Gorton, regardless of party. Regardless if they're in controversy or they've done something that everybody's all fired up about. It's always former President Obama. The same thing with President Trump and the same thing with President Biden. And that may sound like a small thing, but that's a personal thing that I do to try to say everybody's going to be treated the same as best we can. And especially during an election, we would sit there and go, okay, we just gave so-and-so 3 minutes of airtime. We got to get the other side. Even if the other side is not really doing anything that day during the campaign, we reach out to the campaign and find out what they're going to do, trying as best we can to be as fair as possible in how we address those situations. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because I'll tell you what, I have to answer to people. It's not like the network where let's say they're based out of Washington or New York. I go to the grocery store. I go fishing at Lake Harrington. I used to take the kids to school. Now they're all grown up. I go to the gas station and I'm always recognized. I mean, I can't go anywhere without somebody saying, hey, Sam, newsman, or recognizing me. And almost always it's positive. But I have to feel in my heart and my soul that I have been fair and upfront with people in terms of what we're reporting. Do we make mistakes? Yes, we are human. And either we clarify, correct, or apologize if we have to.
I have a question from Brenna Angel. Brenna, you're with the Lexington Fayette County Police.
Yes, I know.
For lack of the proper description. She says, in government, we have a lot of announcements about some new program or initiative, what is the best way to get a TV newsroom? How to get your attention? And are press kits with already produced B-roll graphics, are they helpful? And do you prefer to shoot your own stuff instead?
To answer the last part of that, it's always helpful to offer that, and at least it gives us an option, especially during these times when our reporters are not even allowed in the station right now. So we have a skeleton group of people, anchors and some producers and the news director, but none of the sales staff, none of the photojournalists. Most of the reporters have been working outside the station since the pandemic began. So sometimes, yes, we do need that help of maybe some B-roll video or pictures. And so at least offer it if you have it, because we might need it and we might use it. In terms of trying to talk about a new program, if there's any way you can identify that program from a human standpoint of how it helps a particular person or group of people, and even have a quote from somebody, it saved my life, or this program has changed my life, or this program is something we really need and this is why. Anything to personalize it beyond just a news conference or a news briefing where people are going to show up and just shoot on a tripod and get a couple of statements from the official. Always looking for a way to take it beyond the official and take it to the people at home through somebody that the program affects.
We have a comment from Shelley here on staff, and she makes a good point. I think a lot of people have seen this in their career. When you say to humanize the story, I agree with that. But government agencies aren't quick to warm up to that idea. And some may even say it's unprofessional, or there could be a lawsuit if you start bringing the human element, personal element, into government news. What do you think about that, Dick? Or Sam? I'll keep your last name.
That's fine. I can see it working both ways. I'm not saying that every story has to have a, quote, human personal side to it that we can tell. I'm just saying that's a really good way to grab our attention and maybe to get more airtime and more attention on that story by personalizing it. But that's not always possible, and it doesn't mean we're not going to cover it. When the governor goes to App Harvest, as he did this past about a week ago in Moorhead, to talk about what they're doing with their huge greenhouse and making and growing tomatoes, we're going to cover that, even if we just have a soundbite with the governor or the fellow with App Harvest. It's still a story and still an important story. What would really make that story interesting is to follow the tomatoes from the greenhouse in the snow in Moorhead a week ago to the grocery store in some town in Kentucky and somebody buying the product, but that's not always possible.
Any questions for Sam? You can speak them out loud, or you can put them in the chat and we'll read them off. Feel free to do that.
And I know it's kind of difficult to develop what I would call a relationship with somebody in the media, but sometimes, if you're at a charity event or you hear me speak, or someone that goes to church with me, any way that you can, there's no reason why you can't reach out to someone like myself and say, hey, I've got this story. What do you think? I just had somebody from a local hospital contact me, and I've worked with her before on some things. And she said, hey, I've got this story. And as soon as she told me about it in the email, I was like, yeah, I want to do that story. Let's set it up. It was that fast. But, sometimes that's not always possible to have those relationships. I understand that.
But building the relationship, let's just say with the police department, you rely on the police department, fire department, EMS to get news tips. You want to know first because you're in the news. You want to beat 18 and 36 and anybody else in the business to the story. I understand that. But let's say in doing that, you may also, let's say the police chief dies and you may cover the funeral. If I'm thinking correctly, as a way to say thank you for all you've done for us through the year. Let's cover some of these softer stories when you could really use some good press.
Are you saying that we should, or we could, or we do?
I'm saying that I've seen that done. I'm not saying if it's your station, but I've seen that sort of thing done, and it seems like a nice thing to do, for lack of a better description. You give us the tips on who shot who and where and when, and give us the details of the crime.
Right.
But as a thank you, we may do some of your softer stories. If you're celebrating your 50th anniversary of this, someone dies, someone got married, just to show that there's a human side, if you will, to fire and police and
Sure.
EMS.
Sure. I wouldn't call it a thank you, but I would call it, you try to do a well-rounded newscast includes some stories like the 106-year-old woman who celebrated a birthday, or the veteran in Wilmore who survived COVID, or a medical story with two people who beat COVID after months on the ventilator in the hospital. Or I did a story on a police officer in Lexington, a wonderful story about a fellow who spends most of his shift, almost his entire job as a police officer, in minority neighborhoods. And he's white, but he has this great connection with the people in the community because he goes there not to arrest or investigate. He goes there to try to build relationships. So that's a totally different story from somebody being murdered, and you're asking the basic questions of when, where, what, and how. So to answer your question, a good news station, a good newsroom will cover those kind of stories, the lighter stories, if you want to call them, as well.
We hear a lot, don't blame the messenger. If it's going to storm out, don't blame Chris Bailey. He's just the messenger.
Yeah.
You are just the messenger of news. Do
Yeah.
you get blamed because the world is coming unhinged because of news media? Is that it at all a fair characterization?
Well,
People
I don't know if you realize this, but we did a story on it. But last week, our station was vandalized. In the middle of the night, a guy with a spray can painted all kinds of things on the front of the station. And he did it at the other two stations and another radio station. I don't think they've caught him yet. But you know, that's taking it to a criminal level when that happens. And so when that happens, as a journalist, you do feel exposed because people know where you are and when you're on the air, and pretty much when you're leaving and when you're arriving. So it can get very personal. That's kind of an extreme example, but it just happens, so it kind of hits home. And this person disagreed with us covering COVID and COVID being a real thing. And as I told my general manager, if he thinks that's going to stop us from doing our jobs, he's sadly mistaken.
You've often I've heard you say sometimes to turn the TV off. If the
Sure.
world is a stressful place,
I turn it off.
it's got to be
Sam.
tough. Go ahead.
Hey, Sam, this is Dave Davis. I work with Kentucky Heart Disease and Stroke Prevention, and I've been in state government for over 10 years now, and a lot of what I do and have always done through the various programs is kind of prevention stuff. You mentioned stories and articles and pieces coming to you quickly. What about slowly? How far out do you look, and could you realistically book something, a story? Is it worth it for people to come at you 3 months before we do something, or does it need to be 2 days?
No, it can be, there are some of us, myself, Amber, Garrett Weimer, who's weekend anchor but does some investigative reporting, and Kristen Kennedy. Those four of us do what we call promotable long-term stories that we will shoot. So I'm shooting a story Friday about a couple who both got cancer, but they found out they had cancer through being screened. And it's a good lesson because a lot of people in Kentucky don't live a healthy life, and they don't take care of themselves, and before you know it, they're in trouble, and they don't have regular screenings. But he found out he had prostate cancer through the PSA test, which is what I've been through in the past, and she found out she had breast cancer through her screening. So we're going to do a story with them, and it may not air for a couple of weeks. So that's an example of someone reaching out and saying, hey, we've got this story, Sam, are you interested? And I say, yes, let's set it up. We're going to shoot it Friday, but it may not air for a couple of weeks. So there are members of a news team usually that have that kind of flexibility that can plan ahead and work on things a little bit more long-term versus immediate. But obviously, the newscast is going on today at 4 o'clock, whether we have stories or not. So it's got to be filled. And so that's a lot more immediate. So at 9 o'clock this morning, last night they started planning today. And at 9 o'clock, they're also planning today. And it continues throughout the day because it changes sometimes a lot. But does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you.
It doesn't have to be today. In fact, Amber's got a story involving the American Heart Association tomorrow, and I've got a guest on tomorrow from 7 to 8 from the American Heart Association. I'm not sure who it is. And she's doing a story with Congressman Barr and his wife who passed away because of a heart situation. So that's an example of something that she's been working on probably for a couple of weeks.
I have a friend in Louisville who was regarded by the market as a very good news person, and recently decided, I'm going to leave the business. And it's time to retire, time to resign, time to hang it up and go fishing kind of thing. And I'm wondering, are you seeing that more and more as the world just seems to be coming apart news-wise? And that's sort of a lead into just how thick a skin do you have to sit there and absorb every syllable of the news every day and articulate that? Does it ever get on your nerves, or have you seen it wear people out, burn people out?
Oh, sure. I mean, the demands made on a journalist, a lot of times, when I first broke into the business as a reporter, I had a photographer with me. Now, a lot of our journalists shoot and report. And the equipment's gotten lighter, but they're out there by themselves. We try not to put them in bad situations, especially at night or going to a bad area of town or maybe a remote part of the state, and try to send them with somebody. But I know at the end of the day, doing almost 4 hours of live news, I'm worn out mentally. My wife can attest to that. She has to put up with my grumblings. It can be really stressful because live is live, and once you say it, it's out there. So yeah, it can eat people up. It can burn people up. Some people, it has to be your passion. I mean, this has to be more than just a job. It has to be your passion, and you have to be willing to absorb criticism. And I welcome, when people write an email and they're very critical, as long as they're not being obscene or really, they're being dangerous in any way, I will email them back and say, thank you for your input. I appreciate what you have to say, or this is what I would add to that. So yeah, you have to have a thick skin.
Laura from the membership here wants to know, well, what, if anything, in your experience of covering the news in Lexington and central Kentucky is different or unique compared to where you have covered news elsewhere? I'm going to guess UK basketball, but horses, bourbon, I don't know.
Well, I'd like to think, especially as opposed to Orlando, Atlanta, New York City, Louisville, Washington, D.C., all major cities, that for the most part, people in Kentucky, especially in the rural areas, are very loving, warm, supportive people, and they want to help their neighbor. They're very community oriented. They don't always trust the media, which is to be understood, but if you can get them to warm up to you and you get them to trust you, it can turn out to be a very good experience for both sides. So I've lived 2/3 of my life in Kentucky, so I'm pretty biased, but I happen to think it's a very special state with a lot of different cultures and people mixed in. And for the most part, it's a very positive thing. I would much rather be here than in Atlanta or Orlando. I can tell you that right now.
We want to know, do you ever use a smartphone to record something for a newscast?
Yes, I in fact have shot almost an entire story on my phone. We have done interviews in the past with the phone. We try not to do that. But yes, the phone can be used like that, especially in an emergency or something's happened and you want to, even it could be something fun. Hey, I just saw a foot-long icicle off a building. Look at this, and shoot it, and it could end up on the air.
Smartphone video is becoming a lot the norm these days. You can't you look, and I can't remember the people's names, but every time there's a crowd, there's a crime, there's somebody there with a camera shooting it, and that becomes the video of choice.
Yep. Everything, just about everything's on camera these days. Wherever you go, especially in any kind of urban area, you're going to be on camera.
Any other questions from Mr. Dick? Please speak up or write up.
I'll say it's been an honor and a pleasure to be in my home state for 34 years. I've had great experiences with people, and we work really hard. We really try to give you an idea of what's going on in the world. We can't cover it all, and it certainly shouldn't be your only source of news. But for the most part, I think it's been a really good relationship I've had with the viewers, and a trusting one. And so you just try to grind it out every day and maintain that professionalism despite what's going on around you in the world. And certainly last year has put everybody to the test on that.
The Department of Fish and Wildlife's Kevin Kelly asks, what changes in news gathering brought about by the pandemic, such as news interviews with Zoom, do you think will remain once the world is healed?
Exactly that. So before the pandemic, for the 7 to 8 newscasts, we would ask people to come into the station to be a live guest. And that has stopped. And now we do almost everything by Zoom. We either pre-tape it at 3 or 3:15 or 3:30, or we have someone on live. So tonight we'll have, I believe, Kevin Hall, spokesperson for the Fayette County Health Department, will be on live. And so he's able to go live from his home or from where he works. And it's that, I believe, will stay with us. It's just to be able to reach people in far-flung areas as long as they've got a signal has been huge. So I think that'll definitely stay with us. It's been a really good tool and allows us to reach a lot of different people pretty quickly and easily.
You run marathons, you climb Mount Everest, you swim the Grand Canyon. It seems the only thing that will stop you is kryptonite. You're a second generation Italian. I understand you came here from Italy by yourself when you were 2. Do you speak Italian?
No. But I would give anything to spend another day in the kitchen of my grandparents in Centerville, Iowa, and just soak up everything, because they were right off the boat. They learned how to speak English. They learned how to start their own business. And to be a part of that for one day would be extraordinary. But I don't speak Italian.
We should be wrapping it up, but I want to ask one last question. Anybody else has anything else? Speak up. Now's the chance. In Lexington, you get a lot of newbies coming into the business, fresh out of college, fresh out of UK perhaps. And then you have folks like you who are seasoned professionals. There's not a lot of in between. You could have gone and did anywhere. Went from here to the #1 city in the nation, New York City. That's quite a market. You got to be tough to survive there. Would you recommend, how do you feel about people leaving home, going out and getting that big market experience And then once they do, such as you, why would you come back
Hmm.
to a smaller market and spend the rest of your life?
I came back for two reasons. One, the main reason was that Kentucky's my home. That's where my namesake, my dad now, is buried. It's where I was born. It's where I'm a fan of the UK football and basketball programs. So home is here. Home is not New York. No, home is not Orlando. And then the second reason, I was given a great opportunity, my first anchoring job. Up till then, I had never anchored before. But I will tell you this, at our station, we rarely hire someone on the air who's never worked at another station before. There are some exceptions, but as I speak now, most of our reporters, and they're young, have had at least a couple of years someplace else smaller. Lexington's about the 65th, 63rd TV market in the country, and there are many markets over 100 to give you how small they are. Billings, for example, or Colorado Springs. Well, that's bigger, but so most of our people have some experience. But we do have a number of people, and I think it's their roots. Amber is from Cynthiana. She's a veteran. Bill, of course, has been here almost as long as I have, if not more so. He's from Williamsburg. Barbara Bailey, who just retired, roots in Harlan County. Brian Milam, our sports guy, grew up in Louisville, but worked at YMT in Eastern Kentucky before he came here. I could just kind of go down the list. Just about everybody has roots here in Kentucky, some kind.
Any other remaining questions? I'll give it to David, and you can tell us where this could be seen again for anyone who couldn't join us live.
Absolutely. Again, I want to start by saying thank you, Sam. Appreciate you being here. It's been great. I will have a recording of this. I will post it to our website. It'll probably be the first of next week before it's up there. I will send out an email reminder through our MailChimp subscriptions, letting you know that it is available. I do want to jump in real quick and share the fact that our next Lunch and Learn, our next Lunch and Learn is going to be March 10th at 10 a.m. With Jill Seafried, Executive Director from Prevent Child Abuse Kentucky. So that is just a couple of weeks away. So it won't be long. You'll be getting an email about that soon. You'll be able to get a join link on our website again. I will share that with you. And that's about it. Charlie, do you have any last words?
I do not. Sam, I appreciate you coming aboard.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
You certainly can.
So our traditional newscast, I anchor at 4:35, 5:30, and 6, and 11. But the 7 to 8, which is on the CW, we always have at least 3 guests on, either taped or live, every single night. And usually they are officials, not usually like regular Joe kind of people. And we spend about 5 to 6 minutes having a conversation that is then put on WKYT.com. So if you run across somebody that, especially, we try to find issues of the day that we can expand on. If you run across somebody like that you'd like to have on, contact me, and we can make that happen very quickly.
Do that. Frank Shelton is our newest member. Frank, you've been here. I hope this was a good first meeting for you. Knox County Public School System. So, Frank, welcome
Thank
aboard.
you for having me.
Do you think we do well? Will you stay?
I will say that I have watched Sam all of my 37 years of being alive in Barbara, and I'm down here near where the home roots of Bill is, with Williamsburg there next door. So I appreciate everything that WKYT does for Kentucky.
Well,
You're in Barberville. I have nothing further, but Sam, thanks a million for coming on and keep up the good work, and we'll see you on the news.
Thank you for the kind words.
You're welcome. Everyone else, thanks a million. Watch your email for different things, and we'll see you in a month.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.